Good morning and welcome to Tuesdays Behind the Screen. We're here the 5th of April. Welcome to April as well. And I am JM. This is the Iconic Production channel. In case you're tuning in for the first time, what we do here on Behind the Screen is we just take a step behind the screen and talk about games, game design, review role-playing games, talk about mechanics, just talk about games that we love. So I am here. Bob, good to see you as always. Good friend of myself and of the channel, Mr. Bob Crumb. Go check out his. He's got a Twitch channel as well where he does art. He's done a lot of art. I've worked with him quite a bit. He's got a couple of pieces he's working on for a book that I'm putting together for Pelgrane, and it is always good to see him in the chat. So you can find him. Is it Twitch slash? Is it Mr. Bob Crumb? What's your Twitch channel link, Bob? You can toss that in the chat, and it will appear everywhere through the magic of the chat box. Mr. Bob Crumb, it is. I did get the update this morning, by the way, Bob, and I'm very excited about that. So, what we are talking about today is we're going back to Eki Ezeru. So, Eki Ezeru is a mega dungeon that I'm putting together for Jackals. Not sure if it's just going to be for my group, if it's going to be for a larger use, maybe put it on my blog, or maybe it'll get put together and published. I don't know yet, but it's something that's been on my heart for a while, and I really wanted to delve in and design. So part of Behind the Screen is joining me on the adventure design, the setting design, the site design, the monster design for Eki Ezeru. Now, we've designed two monsters for Eki Ezeru. We've designed the Kashaptu, which is basically a demon of consumption. It consumes the minds and the memories and the devotion of the jackals it encounters. The other one that we're doing is we did a monster for the area outside the world of, or the setting of Eki Ezeru, and that is the Lukuraji, the werewolves, if you will, of Melkone. And so I thought today we'd kind of go back and review what we've done for Eki Ezeru and kind of talk about the first area we're putting together. So, we are looking at today. So here's our Eki Ezeru scalpel. And again, if you're not using scalpel and you like mind mapping software, this is my favorite mind mapping software. Yeah, Bob, I think we really created some truly disturbingly creepy monsters. It's not necessarily always the goal of Jackals or even monster design for me, right? When we're doing 13th Age monsters, we're always focused on what's the most fun and can we provide interesting choices for the DMs and for the players. Move my mic a little closer. Can we make interesting choices for the GMs or the players? So one of my favorite mechanics in 13th Age is how devils work. So in 13th Age, you have this escalation die that every round ticks up 1 point, and it adds to all heroes as a bonus to hit. So the longer the fight goes on, you end up getting a 5% bonus to hit every round until eventually, the dramatic tension has swung into your favor. But devils are all about contracts, and so one of the fun things that they do, I got to design some devils for an upcoming book, is if you want to use the escalation die for the round, you have to pay the devil's due. And so basically, to use this global mechanic, you have to make a choice. Am I willing to give this devil something in return for using this benefit? And you don't have to, but you're sort of, and you're not hampered because you're still rolling at your base sheet values, but there's still something fun there about going, hey, this monster's different. And I think so sometimes I design monsters with the fun or the choice in mind, and then sometimes, like these guys, I had a really strong theme that I wanted, this idea of transgressive consumption. And now we've got two really awesome monsters for Jackals. All right, so again, kind of going back to the lore, what is Eki Ezeru? Well, Eki Ezeru was a Hunnic the Han are a dead species on my world. They're referred to as the Children of the Moon. They existed in the prehistory of jackals, and as my adventurers may find, there may be a bit of science fantasy in or around or connected to the Han that is not as prevalent in the Bronze Age focused world of the jackals. This is sort of like a prehistory, an Atlantis sort of like, well, not even Atlantis, because that's really more of the Hulathi, but sort of like Atlantis as it may have been presented in the Stephen Lawhead books. Right, yeah, a little science fantasy. Bob knows what I'm talking about. So the Han had these mansions. They built these vast mansions underground, and slowly and surely each one of them fall apart. I know you like a lot of Lawhead. That is why I referenced it. So the idea here is that the Han have slowly faded from the world, and Eki Ezeru was one of the last flowering of the Hanic people in the Zaharets, right? Some of them fell when humans arrived into the Zaharets. Some of them fell during the wars with the East. And the last large one was definitely in during the time of the great of Fuenten IV's great assault on the gates of the East. And the Han of Eki Ezeru went and aided the humans of the Grand Kingdoms, ended the threat of the East, and they were cursed. And one of these curses is the Kashaptu. And so essentially, Eki Ezeru, the twice cursed house, has fallen completely into darkness and chaos. And my group that I'm running this for, they are on the threshold of discovering that it exists in the region. If any of you are watching, and so we're going to talk about kind of what the idea for Eki Ezeru is. Now, I have no desire at this point to do a room by room mapping of Eki Ezeru. So what I want to do here with you guys is talk about the themes and the main zones, and kind of like maybe pull together some ideas for themes and images and sensory touchstones for each of these areas. That's kind of like our goal over the next couple of months, is to kind of sketch out all of the main areas, see what's in there, and kind of come up with what we think would be a cool roughing out of each area. So some of the themes that we've talked about in Eki Ezeru and in the monster design are definitely like the themes of loss, right? The Kashaptu, thanks to people in the chat, are terrifying, as are the Lukaraji, right? You have this idea of you can lose yourself in this dungeon, right? The Kashaptu will render you less than what you were. The Lukaraji can infect you with a curse or a disease that leads to a curse, and there's this several steps down the path, but you would eventually lose your sense of self or identity. Or as Ben Feehan, there we go. Hey, Ben, what a perfect time to arrive, because I was about to, Noetic Horror, which is a term that I was introduced to by Ben and really like a lot, right? It's the threat of the loss of the soul, right? Whereas cosmic horror sort of threatens our minds and our sanity. Noetic horror and, slasher horror threatens our bodies. Noetic horror threatens our souls. Trying to think of some really good examples of noetic horror in modern fiction. I think Dracula, when it came out, was very terrifying to the people of that day for this reason, and we've lost it. We don't have it anymore. But right, the idea that a creature damned could revoke your eternal life to a deeply Christian culture would have been terrifying. Hellraiser is the other one that I'm thinking of, Bob. Yeah, Clive Barker's sort of, I won't, maybe not his seminal work, but definitely probably his most popular. I'm a much bigger fan novel wise of Magica, but yeah, the Hellbound Heart Hellraiser, the idea that you could do something that would cause you to be damned, and not necessarily linked in a cause effect kind of thing. It's not like, I went out and did these horrible things, therefore Pinhead shows up, right? Which is sort of a slasher trope, right? The slasher trope has this idea of, hey, you've done something, now the slasher is coming for you, right? Kind of epitomized in the first and possibly the second Scream movie, where they kind of walk through the rules of slasher films. And I think Cabin in the Woods takes that to a very meta level as well. A lot of the fiction that inspired Lovecraft has noetic horror. Yeah, Clark Ashton Smith has a lot of noetic horror. Uh, Arthur Machen. I don't know that I've read much of him, Ben. The One Ring, right? As Ben pointed out in the chat, the One Ring is this thing that imperils you merely by holding, possessing it, right? In possessing it, it in turn possesses you. So these are all themes that I want to work into. Oh, thanks, Ben. That I really want to work into Eki Ezeru. And man, is this going to be a difficult sell. Um, right? It's going to require the players to pick up on it and deal with it in different ways, right? In Jackals, or any role-playing game, right? A slasher, or a body horror monster is easy to deal with, right? The Takan come from you, you cut them down. They come at you with violence, you match them with violence. Cosmic horror is a lot harder to deal with, right? It's kind of the next tier up. How do you deal with cosmic horror? Well, you know, you stand in the back of the party, you burn all the books, and you keep dynamite like on a dead man switch. Or you accept the fact that you are fighting to prevent something bad from happening at the cost of your character's sanity, but you know on some level that you are moving past that, and you are providing for everyone else. Noetic horror is a lot tougher for players to deal with, and I would say it's a much more difficult thing to capture in a role playing game, especially in something like a dungeon. And I realize we're talking really heady today, but I really want to sort of talk about this theme of noetic horror, because I want to make sure that it's at the forefront of my mind as I kind of go through this. And I think the way we're going to do this, we're actually going to steal something. Uh, in case you don't know, 80% at least of game design is game recognizing game and going, I'm going to steal that. Um, Age of Sigmar Soulbound. Padre, if you're watching this at some point, thank you for the recommendation. Has a way of presenting adventures that goes rumor, fear, and I think the last tier is threat or something like that, right? There's the rumor of something that kind of gets your players pulled in. Then you have the fear as it sort of takes hold in the community, and then you actually have the threat materialize. And so I think what we want to do with each of these areas is provide rumors that are not going to actually be rumors, right? It's a dead mansion they're investigating, but like ways to foreshadow what's coming. Then we'll have an initial entrance into the zone where the fear takes hold. What is the things they should fear? And then when they finally come in contact with the main threat of the zone, that's when we have kind of the confrontation. Let me jump over to the chat here. Yeah, it is a very old world idea. Noetic horror is. It's not something, right? We kind of hit the age of enlightenment and post enlightenment and modernism, and that threat of the soul sort of goes away. We see a much larger rise in cosmic horror as a direct, reaction to um, modernism and kind of the humanist movement. And then we get into slasher horror kind of in the post World War II, probably even more like postmodern era of our world, which is interesting on just a complete side note, I wonder if there's a scaling down or a sort of a demythalized demythal I'm not going to pronounce that word correctly. I haven't had enough. Right? A removing of the myth. So like take for example Dracula, like the OG Noetic Horror guy. So we have Dracula, crucifix, running water, communion wafers, right? These are all things that are tied into the fact that Dracula is an inversion of Christ and the Eucharist, right? Then we get vampires, where okay, now you have it's not a crucifix, it's just a cross. Then we get to kind of Stephen King's vampires, and we get um, cross, but only by people who really truly believe. You kind of get that in Buffy as well. And Buffy, we start to see the transition from creature of darkness to sort of that reinterpretation of Dracula as kind of a metaphor for sexuality in the area that it came from. So you have like Angel and Spike. Oh, now there's possibly good vampires, all the way down to completely unrecognizable vampires, in which where we have the Twilight films. I would all I would also say that the one remnant of this that sort of maybe pushes back in a unique way is Mobius the Living Vampire. We recapture some of that personal transformative horror that we've lost in kind of modern vampirism. I have not seen the new Mobius movie, but at least the trailers seem to kind of lean into that as well. Although Blade did a pretty decent job, at least with the body horror of vampires. So Ben says even Wind in the Willows has a sense of noetic horror in its chapter Pipers at the Gates of Dawn, which, let's just be honest, Pipers at the Gates of Dawn sounds like a Lovecraft story. um, Tell me I'm wrong, Bob. Fight me on this one. On a certain sense, there's something is touching you on a level where the physical and the spiritual meet. Right. That's the sense of wonder or awe. But also we remember that like there's this aspect of wonder that leaves you changed. And so things can be like, right, awful and awestruck have are built around this idea of awe. Um, right, depending if you read the Old Testament, the type of awe that people saw when they came face to face with God is completely different depending on where they're at. uh, all right, on a complete side note, Bob, I need a strong yes or no. Have you seen the HP Joelcraft video? And if not, I'm a bad friend and will send it to you. It is the peak of internet. So all of this comes together as we kind of which content is what you're here for, Ben? Oh, is it my digression into uh, the descent of vampires from noetic to body horror? Okay, so we're back in Eki Ezeru. Well, thanks, Ben. I'm glad that you enjoyed my digression. Um, so the first thing that's going to happen is the group is going to discover what I'm calling the Western Holds. So the Western Holds, there used to be a city on the outskirts of the mansion. So in the foothills of the Vorivana, there was a thriving city where Han and Hulathi came together. It started up as a trading post and kind of grew out into sort of the outskirts of Eki Ezeru. And essentially what has remained from the near millennia of abandon and neglect is that there is what the group has been referred to as the burial mounds. And actually, the burial mounds, and I'll put this in here, the burial mounds aren't actually burial mounds. They are the foundations of the old buildings that now have stuff that has grown up over them. They're going to get insights. They're sorry, I'm going to kind of keep track of this as we write through it. the ruins of the city, and the graves are actually the ruins of the fall. Uh, the sensory, so the sensory things, I'm a big fan of putting in jackals. Um, oh, thanks, Ben. Like Eki Ezeru and the Vorivana, that kind of thing. Um, One thing that I do with all of my jackals adventures is I always put in the sensory stuff. What do jackals see? What do they hear? What do they smell? And that is always information that is told to the GM. You give your jackals that information before they even make perception rolls, because it grounds the jackal's experience in what they see, what they hear, what they smell. Perception rolls are for things that come after first glance, after first blush, after first um, impressions. So, Bob, I will send you that video. In fact, I may link it in the show notes because it is the greatest thing the internet has ever produced. So, sensory things for this. We're going to I'm going to point out the regular lines, right? I want them to come to this area that looks like foothills, and there are little dig sites. But as they see, each of these little hills is actually a little bit too regular. They're spaced a little too reasonably apart. And the idea is it's because they're not looking at foothills, they're looking at the ruins of what was a pretty impressive trade town. And so the trade town event zone is going to be the first thing the players encounter. So we're almost at the end of time. I don't know if I apologize or not for the digression into Noetic Horror, but I think it sets up a good theme for Eki Ezeru, and we'll be back next week with more Eki Ezeru development. I will say that Thursday we have. Well, thanks, Bob. I appreciate that, and I feel like Ben was totally down with the breakdown of vampires as well. I think Apologies is sort of like an agoogly. Hopefully, Bob remembers that joke. Like I Googleized all the time. So Thursday we have an interview that I recorded with Evan and myself. We're going to go to Chaosium Con. I will be in the air flying to Chaosium Con on Thursday. So Evan and I are going to talk about what we're excited about, what we're going to see, what we're going to view. And when I get back, I'll probably end up talking about the awesome things that happened at Chaosium Con. What I learned on my summer vacation at Chaosium Con. Rook, good to see you, sir. Thank you. Glad to see you here in the chat, and thank you for your generosity. We had a great discussion about Noetic Horror and the descent of vampires in popular culture. So you were missed, but hopefully you will enjoy it on YouTube. For those of you who like what we do, please consider subscribing over on YouTube. Hit the like button, leave a comment, press the thumbs up button. Lets the algorithm know, hey, people like this content. If you like us here on Twitch, please consider following us here or subscribing. Or if you were in the chat today, thank you to Rook, who has gifted out some subscriptions. And if you want to be part of the discussion, please consider joining our Patreon at patreon.com/iconicproduction. We have a Discord channel that is just filled with patrons. We're discussing a lot of things. We're actually discussing the plan for the new stream game we're going to do on the channel. And right now, it's down to 3 different games. It's down to Forbidden Lands. It's down to Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And it's also, Padre, if you were listening, I am seriously considering giving Soulbound a go on the stream. And if that happens, Rook, Ben, Bob, you guys are all invited to join. The idea that we are going to be going with on this, I'll spend the last little bit here. The idea will be to take what I do with the tour game, which I realize isn't everybody's cup of tea, but we're going to be, in the tour game when I run it, it's more of a show. So the chat gets to interact with the cast and myself. They gain possibilities. The possibilities can be spent on monsters or on the characters, and I want to take that aspect and I want to try and just turn it up to 11 so that the chat gets to pick monsters from the wandering monster tables. The chat maybe somebody in the chat gets to come on the next episode and play the big bad evil guy. We're gonna have multiple groups, and the idea will be each episode will be 3 to 5 hours, like a full session, start to finish, episodic. But that each episode will build, and the mystery will slowly unfold as each of the different groups are going out to do their own things. Bob, you can totally, if we go Age of Sigmar, you can totally play a Fire Slayer who hammers the bone metal of their dead god into their flesh to give them superpowers. Essentially, Age of Sigmar is just high fantasy superheroes. Is essentially the theme and the vibe I'm getting from it, having read Soulbound. It would be too close to real life for you, Bob. I do think it's in my cart right now. I think I'm going to buy Fury of the Depths, which is a starter set for Age of Sigmar that comes with Fire Slayers and the Ideneth Deepkin, which are the sort of crazy broken deep sea elves, which have some of the coolest minis. Well, hey, when you come down to visit, I'll have a complete set of Slayers versus elves that we can try out, and land sharks and sea sharks as well. Well, that brings us to the end of today's Behind the Screens. Again, thank you to everyone who showed up and joined. If you're watching this on YouTube, please leave a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are. I love chatting with people there. I respond to all of the comments. So until next time, I will not be here live on Thursday, but we will have a great show for you then. And I will see you on Tuesday for more Behind the Screen. Thanks, everyone. Bob, I'll send you the link to that video as soon as I get off here. Have a good one.